Welcome to Rebel Health Collective podcast, where we're not just talking about health, we're transforming it. Here at Rebel Health Collective, our mission is simple but powerful. It's to advocate for you and your health rights, educate you with reliable information, connect you with a community that understands, and inspire you to take control of your well-being. Join us as we explore courageous health journeys, challenge the status quo, and empower you to be at the center of your healthcare decisions. This is more than just a podcast. It's a movement. Together, we're building a world where everyone has the knowledge and support to live their healthiest lives. Please note that the information shared in this podcast is not medical advice and should not be treated as such. Our goal is to share stories, open up new ways of thinking, and inspire action in your health and well-being. Always consult your primary care team before implementing any new care protocol into your regimen. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rebel Health Collective. Now, without any further delay, let's get into today's episode. Hey, Kathy, it's great to have you here. I am honestly so excited for our conversation today. It's almost one of those that I would have lied and said that I have a podcast just to try to get an hour of your time and pick your brain. So I just am so excited to hear and get some of the insights that you have. As a dad, someone with a 2.5-year-old son, I feel like one of the biggest things that I struggle with is food and his diet. I crowdsourced a lot of my friends and family, and the responses of questions that I got were honestly the most that I've ever gotten for any podcast. So it's something that a lot of people are interested in. And I think that a lot of people want to know, but don't even know where to start. It seems like you can go on social media or Facebook or wherever, and one expert can say one thing, and then the very next thing you scroll to is a different story recommending different products, different foods, different advice. So I really enjoy where you come from because I feel like you're realistic about it. It's not saying that you need to be waking up at 2:30 in the morning and meal prepping all these organic things that you picked from your garden, from rainwater, from the Everglades. It's realistic. It's going to Costco. It's providing parents with nutritional information that make our lives easier, but give us the peace of mind of I am taking care of my child. They're getting the nutrients that they need. And so I really appreciate that from you. And I know we're going to learn a lot. So without me rambling on too much, I'll turn it over to you if you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll jump into it.
For sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I get so fired up about nutrition and specifically about nourishing our little ones' bodies and brains. I have been a dietitian for almost 10 years, but it wasn't until having my son and becoming a mom 3 years ago that I realized how little guidance parents actually get on the feeding journey. And I had worked in the hospital setting for many years, helping little ones and families to essentially undo a lot of issues that were nutrition related in early years that I realized could have been prevented. And so after becoming a mom, realizing what little guidance I got, and that if I didn't have my own nutritional background and education to fall back on, I would have been a little panicked. Trying to figure out what or how to feed a baby or a toddler because that just doesn't translate easily. Even if you know nutrition for yourself, it's very different when you're trying to apply it to a little one. And so I started an Instagram page when we started solids with my son just to essentially help anyone else who was in the same season and maybe give somebody peace of mind that they were on the right track or guidance where they felt lost. And it kind of just took off. And I left my clinical job and now I work full time coaching parents through feeding their babies and toddlers. And I love it.
That's awesome. And as someone who's had a little bit of a medical background, it is insane how much my diet changes the state of my body. I mean, around the Christmas season, I kind of let loose a little bit and I could feel it. And when I came into January and started to try to get back on track and really start cleaning up my diet again, I could tell how far off the tracks I'd gotten. For me, that's always so important when I'm thinking about my son. And it's really easy after a long day of work to want to stop by McDonald's and just grab the Happy Meal or go by Chick-fil-A. I'm so excited to hear your side of how we can make it work. And be healthy for our children without sacrificing a ton of time and having to quit our day job to be a personal chef. So
Totally.
I guess one of the biggest questions that I got when I was asking friends and family is, what does a basic balanced day to day diet look like for a child? And kind of a follow on question to that is, when they don't want to eat dinner or breakfast or lunch, is that okay? I mean, can I put my son down to bed at night if he hasn't eaten dinner?
So I'm going to answer the first part first in
Okay.
regard to kind of what does a balanced diet look like for a toddler. This is where I really ask, similar to what you just said, of when you aren't eating well and nourishing your body well, you feel the effects of that. Think of your little ones the same, that their bodies need the same kind of nourishment that you do. But I know that nutrition also just feels like this big, confusing, tangled web, like you said, when you hear from somebody do this and then you hear from somebody else do this, right? So when I'm looking at what does a balanced diet look like, it is primarily whole foods based with a balance of protein, carbs, and healthy fat and fiber, because we all need that too. I think that's one of the most overlooked nutrients for most people. Really, what your little one's diet should look like is a reflection of your own diet in kind of smaller portions, so to speak. Now, there are definitely nutritional differences there, meaning the percentage of certain nutrients that a toddler needs compared to what an adult needs is definitely going to look different. Little ones need 50 to 60% of their diet to be made up of carbohydrates because they are the number one fuel source for their brain and they're super important for their growth and development. So there are definitely differences in terms of macronutrient needs and things like that. But when we're looking at how do we, one, feed our little ones a balanced diet, but two, see your little ones actually eat a balanced diet, really what that comes back to is, what are you doing in your home? What are you modeling to them? Because they are looking to you to be that example, to know exactly what should be going in their body or what shouldn't be going in their body. And that's honestly where the mini me concept came from the Mini Me Dietitian, is that our relationships with food, our view of health, and how we are fueling our own bodies is what our little ones are going to mimic. And so we want to be modeling what we want them to someday do. Now, in regards to food refusal, there's also more to it than just eat what you want them to eat and they're just going to do it, because they are also toddlers, right? Or babies or kids. And so there is so much nuance in that and also practical application as well. So everything that I teach my clients and what I really focus my practice around is what's called the division of responsibility, which states that it's the parent's job to decide what, when, and how food is served or offered. It's the child's job to choose if, what, or how much to eat of it. So, in that regard, or going off of that principle, that means that if you do put a meal in front of your child and they refuse to eat it, that is their choice. But there are also a lot of things that we can do to help them to want to take an interest in the foods that you're putting in front of them, and also to take a look at kind of their whole day or even their whole week of intake versus thinking if they skip one meal, I'm putting them to bed hungry. Because what I think a lot of parents overlook or don't think about is the fact that our little ones do have very intact and reliable hunger and fullness cues. And so when we decide that we should be the one determining what or how much, well, we should be determining what. If we think that we are should be determining how much they should be eating, then we are essentially overriding those internal cues. And everything that I do is through the lens of building a healthy relationship with food. And if you want to build a healthy relationship with food for your child, you have to let them have autonomy in what goes in their body.
I like that. Yeah. And I mean, it's up to us. They can't go in and make the food in the kitchen. So it's up to us to prepare it and ensure that it's nutritious and going to fuel them. But you can't hold them down and force it down with a syringe or anything like that. And I guess a question I have that falls on that. So I make dinner and we try to sit down, the three of us, and have dinner together. Our son helps us a lot in the kitchen. I wanted to get into that with you as well. But so we sit down, maybe he eats a bite or two, a spoonful or two, and it's just like, I'm done. Because he'll say like, I'm not hungry, and kind of pushes his plate away and like, I don't want anything. What would you do in that situation? We try to have him just sit up there, and he doesn't have to eat, but he can sit up there, and we're trying to just keep him at the table. We made that dinner. There's food there. Obviously, we're going to try to keep him at the table. If he wants to eat, he eats. Would you later, once we're done, we've cleaned up, leave that food out for him to come back and pick up maybe, or 40 minutes later maybe try again and sit down? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's going to look different for every family and at different ages. So for an 18-month-old or a 2-year-old, if you're having dinner at 5:36, then you're probably turning around and doing bath and bedtime. So you might not have a whole lot of time in between to just sit there and have an hour-long dinner time, or even to come back and revisit that dinner. I definitely wouldn't say that we want to turn around and offer a snack or something more exciting to your little one, because that can reinforce the behavior of meal refusal. But as your child gets older and maybe there is more time in between dinner and bedtime, there could be an opportunity to build in a routine bedtime snack that is just always there in case a belly needs to be filled before dinner, I mean, before bedtime, but not where we are hinging that snack based on the mealtime performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely get that. And another, you touched on it in your initial answer, and
Mhm.
one of the things that I just want to put out there is our son does so much better when he's in the kitchen and helping us and a part of it. And because sometimes we're working over the stove and we don't want him with the hot pans and that kind of stuff. And it's taking a big bowl, a spoon, and some oatmeal, and him just kind of mixing it around. But he's a part of it, and he's in the middle of it. And for whatever reason, that seems to help so much. And we've gotten some of those stools that are like counter height that he can stand
The
in, and
learning tower.
yeah, he can push it around and all that. And that's been the best investment for our kitchen that we've ever made, because he's so much more in tune with cooking and helping us out. And that really does seem to make a difference in him eating dinner. And I think that's a big part of, you can put all the effort in to make your kids these healthy meals. But if you're eating Chick-fil-A or McDonald's and pulling it out of the bag, they're going to want that. It kind of needs to be that they're incorporating what the whole family's eating. And so I really like that you mentioned on that what they're eating should be a reflection of your diet and what you're eating as well.
Totally. Well, we're quite literally showing them what to do. I think a lot of times we think that we need to teach them with our words, but really what we're teaching them with is our action.
Definitely. And that kind of goes into my next question, where we're talking about preparing foods and dinner and snacks. Are there anything that you would avoid completely? I mean, like, you get on Instagram and sometimes people are like, don't give your kids anything that comes out of a wrapper. If it comes out of a wrapper, it's ultra processed and it's just going to destroy them for the rest of their lives. What are some like practical tips that we can do for dinner and snack and on the go?
Yeah. I think the idea of never eating something out of a wrapper is very unrealistic. It's not practical. And if you're able to do that, more power to you. If you make every single thing from scratch, that's amazing. I'm going to applaud you and cheer you on for doing that. But it's not fair to make other parents feel like they aren't doing enough if they're buying things that come out of a package. Because when we actually talk about the definition of processed, most of our foods are processed to some degree. So I think that's very much a hype word that people get stuck on. And really, what I care more about is what the diet looks like as a whole in its entirety, and also recognizing that there are things that come in packages that can have a lot of nutritional value. I mean, think about a frozen vegetable. I would take my child eating a frozen vegetable over not eating a vegetable any day. But a frozen vegetable comes in a package, right? So we have to think about what we're really saying when we say those things. But in regards to just kind of quick reference, how to help someone think through what should I be looking for when I am buying things out of a package, as often as possible, looking for foods that are real whole ingredients. So, for example, a frozen vegetable, or if you're talking snacks, things that are, and I think we're going to touch on this a little bit later too, but the two main things that I'm watching for are sodium content and added sugars, because those two things are very frequently higher in toddlers' diets than we want them to be. And we know that those are connected to poor health outcomes. So that is really where I live in terms of things that come in a package. I would never be one to define a diet as healthy or not healthy based on whether foods come from a package or not. I'm going to look at the nutritional value of what are you buying.
Yeah, that makes sense and is refreshing to hear. From your Instagram, when I was searching through it, I saw some of the hauls that you do, and especially the Costco ones. Those are near and dear to my heart. We make a trip every Saturday. Not great for the bank account, but a lot of fun for the family to get out to. And my wife was kind of laughing at me because I was going through and you were showing some of the snacks that you would pick out and that you have in your house. And I'd be like, yes, like we're doing good. We're getting some good ones. And then some of the ones that we'd actually bought in previously and then stopped buying were some of the ones that you said, like, the label looks great, but when you look at the nutritional values and the added sugars, it's really not there. And those outside boxes can be really tricky.
And marketing is a multi-billion dollar industry for a reason, right? So what something looks like on the outside isn't always better, right? The more expensive product isn't always the better product just because they have better branding or marketing or it has all these fancy labels on it that make it look healthier. So we really need to know what are we buying, not just the brand or the label that's on the outside of the package.
Yeah, definitely. And to kind of group up our first topic of just general nutrition and meals, should toddlers, once you're going from the formula or breast milk and going into more the solid state, what does a normal day look like? Should it be three meals like we're accustomed to, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with some snacks in between? If you could kind of give a high level overview of what that should look like, that'd be great.
Totally. So toddlers definitely need an eating opportunity about every 2 to 4 hours throughout the day. And really, when you look at a toddler's day, that does kind of come out to be three meals and 1 to 2 snacks. I usually live in the area of three meals and two snacks, like a mid-morning snack and then a mid-afternoon snack. Because the other thing that I see snacks as is an opportunity for nutrition. So snacks don't just have to be fillers. They don't just have to be a packaged snack either. I mean, I know a lot of people love the Costco hauls that I do and things like that, but that also doesn't mean that the snacks that I feed are always packaged Costco snacks. We do a lot of fruits, veggies, yogurt, cheese, things that are fridge snacks even. So whole foods can be part of snacks too. Anyways, that's a tangent on snacks, but thinking of snacks as being additional eating opportunities. The other thing to think about in that schedule is that going back to meal refusal and getting to dinner time, putting all this effort into a dinner that then your toddler takes 2 bites of and says they're all done can feel really frustrating. To think of it from their point of view, though, by the time they get to dinner, they are spent. It's been a long day. They have been overstimulated. They may or may not have napped. You don't know what state your toddler is in by the time they get to dinner. And they have already had multiple eating opportunities in the day. So they genuinely could not be very hungry at that time, which is why I don't want to put all of my eggs in the dinner time basket, so to speak. I want to spread nutrition out throughout the day so that if my toddler does get to dinner time and he's just over it, then I'm not so anxious and worried because I know that I put nutritional value into the other parts of his day too. The other piece of that is that an over hungry toddler is not more likely to engage with food. So that can kind of go both ways. So your toddler could be coming to dinner not very hungry because their tank is pretty full from eating throughout the day. Or if we are trying to stick to just breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we decide that we're cutting out the snacks. We don't need them here. Your little one could be over hungry coming to the dinner table, which is also going to pour into that meal refusal as well, because an over hungry toddler is not more likely to engage with the food that you put in front of them. They're actually more likely to backfire on you.
That makes sense. And I can see how that could happen. And it'd probably be going for the sugary type snack in that situation too. I mean, I'd assume there's some sort of a craving that would be in there rather than the fruits and vegetables that are in front of them necessarily.
Meaning, sorry, clarify that.
So, like, if they came to the table overly hungry, I can see in those senses maybe not wanting what's in front of them, but some sort of a snack that they really like, having like an extra desire for that food that's not on the plate, I guess.
Yeah, and to put a little bit of insight behind that, that food that's not on the plate that they might turn around and ask for might be a food that they have a stronger comfort level established with. So a lot of times at dinner is when we're kind of expecting our toddlers to more explore the family meal. And if they haven't been eating the family meal from the very beginning, or these aren't foods that they are 100% comfortable with, then they, yes, might be more inclined to want the cracker or the packaged snack that feels known and comfortable to them. So that's a really big part of why I do push parents and encourage parents to stay the course and stay consistent in feeding the family meal from the very beginning. Even when you're hitting bumps in the road, there are ways to help your little one through those bumps in the road to be able to stay consistent, because when we don't stay consistent and they do get more used to snack foods or packaged foods, then it is harder to work backwards. It's not impossible, it's totally possible. And that's what I help a lot of my clients do. But it does end up being a little bit harder on you.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that actually sparks another question. So for meals, should we be trying to keep like a more standard rotation of meals throughout the week, where I guess maybe a better way to say that is, instead of having 20 different meals to choose from as a family, and we'll just say for dinner, to keep it simple, should we keep it to more like 10 so that they're seeing the same types of food more often, or should we keep it more mixed up,
Yeah,
if that
I
makes
love that
sense?
question. I love that question. I think the answer to that is going to look different for every family, because some families have the capacity to have a 20 rotation meal schedule, some families don't. That's going to look different based on what your schedules are, what your work life is, what your food budget is, even. Something that I do encourage all of my clients to do, and anyone who follows me on Instagram too, is something we do want to achieve for our little ones is variety. And a reason for that is because it takes so many exposures to the same foods for them to really determine a preference. So if we've put broccoli in front of them 3 or 4 times and decided that they don't like it, and so we stop serving it, we really haven't done that food justice, because they really haven't had an opportunity to truly figure out if they could learn to like that food yet. Multiple exposures is very important, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be 20 exposures in 2 weeks' time. If you really think about how long you have to feed your child, we are in this for the long haul, right? And so that variety, I mean, you can define that differently in so many different seasons, but I think, and where I live, is variety is important for everyone. If you are rotating the same 4 vegetables in your diet every single week, then you could probably benefit from some variety too, right? So I really don't agree with saying that you have to put a certain number on it, or this is how many, there's not a perfect number of this is how many meals you should have in rotation. But I definitely don't think that you need to limit yourself, meaning we need to be eating the same 5 meals on repeat until they learn to like it, and then we can move on to the next five, because food burnout can also be a real thing. So I did that with my son. When he was about 10 months, he was eating broccoli like nobody's business. And I felt like I had won the lottery. Like, I did it. I'm the dietitian mom. I got my son to like broccoli. And that lasted for a couple weeks. And then he completely stopped eating. And it's because I got too overzealous. And I was like, yes, this is safe. I know he's going to eat it. And so I was serving it pretty regularly. And he burnt out on it. So we had to take a break and come back to it again later. I knew that that wasn't necessarily like, oh, we're writing this food off forever. He's never going to eat it again. I knew we were going to revisit it again later. And today, as a toddler, he eats it, but it's not something that we eat every single week, maybe every other week. But I rotate the fruits and vegetables and all foods that we're seeing on a regular basis.
Okay, that's good insight, because I guess in my mind it was one of those. like you mentioned, they need exposure to it. So just put it all in 3 weeks and do it over and over and over. But I can definitely see, I mean, they're little humans. They want
Hmm.
variety. They want to do different things. And it's kind of like doing a meal prep for a month and eating chicken and broccoli and sweet potatoes all month long. Kind of gets old.
Sometimes we don't give them credit or enough credit, I think, for how much they are truly learning food. Like we have known food for so many years and they are just figuring it out. And we kind of expect them to just understand that food is food and it fuels your body and it's going to make you feel good. And if you just eat this, then you wouldn't wake up hungry in the middle of the night. But they don't understand that yet. And so we have to give them some grace too.
I'm 31 and I just figured out this year how important food is. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
they
it's always
definitely,
been a part of your life, right?
oh,
Even if
definitely.
you've
Yeah,
changed how you've nourished your body, nobody's exempt from food. We all eat food from the day we're born, right? So I think we do kind of have this level of expectation for kids to just get it, and we don't give them the credit where credit is due that they are learning, just like they're learning everything else. We wouldn't expect them to sit down in front of a book and start reading out of nowhere one day, but we do expect them to sit down and just eat the food that's put in front of them.
yeah. And we're going through potty training right now.
Yeah,
And like you mentioned it, the learning aspect of it, he's got something new that he's learning. He's trying to figure that out. And he's one of those where he gets really embarrassed and frustrated with himself if he has
mm,
an accident. And so that has kind of led into some of the dinner stuff as well, where we're having to be a little more lenient and work with him and understand he's got a lot going on right now. He's working through some stuff.
totally. I think that's a really big part of feeding toddlers that parents oftentimes overlook or can be really eye-opening when they do realize how much of it is mental on the parents' part. Like the amount of mindset work that you really need to do if you want to raise a healthy, adventurous eater for the long haul. It comes back to us.
It does. And I'm so thankful that there's people like you helping people like me. So, the next section, and one of the things I got a lot of feedback on from family and friends, is food allergies and safety. So,
Mm,
we've got a couple friends who they have some toddlers that are going through different food allergies. They've had troubles with eggs and dairy, and they've tried reintroducing it a couple times. And for us, I mean, like milk and cheese and some of that stuff is some of the easy ways to get protein and all of that for our son. And so for those that can't necessarily use those as a way to supplement for protein, are there other ways that they can be making up for that nutrient loss?
absolutely. Food allergies are really hard, and I fully believe that parents with little ones with food allergies, especially multiple food allergies, are the real MVPs because it's a lot to think about and think through. My son had a cow's milk protein allergy as a baby, thankfully grew out of it, but even just navigating that for the year that I did was overwhelming to think about going into schools or daycares, navigating that. Yeah, anyways, that's a tangent, but I applaud anyone who is a food allergy parent because it's a lot. In regards to filling nutrient gaps, if that's something that you feel really like you're struggling with, I strongly recommend working with a dietitian closely because it can be easy for there to be nutrient gaps if you're not putting specific strategy behind what you're doing. But that is going to look different for every family based on what those allergies are and what your family abilities are, all of those kinds of things. So I'm never one to say you have to do it this way. There are so many different ways to approach nutrition and to meet nutritional needs, but some of the foods that could fill those gaps would be things like beans or lentils can be good sources of protein. If you're not allergic to dairy, then dairy sources are going to be a good source of protein. Eggs are obviously are nuts and seeds. Peanuts and tree nuts are separate allergens. So if your little one is allergic to peanuts, you could still potentially explore tree nuts as a protein option. And I know a lot of people on the internet will say, well, peanut butter's not a protein source. It's more of a fat source. And yes, it is. But for little ones, for babies and toddlers, their protein needs are actually pretty low. So a serving of peanut butter in my book for a toddler totally counts as a protein serving or as a protein food, even though for an adult it may not add that much protein. For a toddler, it does. So that's one thing to explore as well. But really thinking about how different forms of protein add up throughout the day. I mean, there's also soy forms of protein, so like tofu or edamame, but even just a couple grams here or there throughout the day can add up to meet their needs throughout the day. So I definitely think it's different than thinking like as an adult, we need a serving of meat at every meal that's 20 or 30 grams of protein. Your little ones don't need that. So it is very easy to meet their protein needs as long as you are strategic about it throughout their day. You know, if they're really just getting fruits and veggies throughout the day, then you're going to be lacking. But just to put a little bit of strategy behind that can be easy to do. So, but that's going to look really specific based on what the allergies are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of our really close friends, they have, a dairy allergy and eggs as well. Kind of, eggs would be an easy one for protein if they like eggs. And so that one's out. So it definitely does, vary from one to the other. And is there a value, like a macro value for protein that we should be trying to hit?
So the minimum for toddlers is about 16 to 19 grams of protein a day.
Wow,
So
interesting.
when you really let that sink in, if you think about that, 16 grams of protein can be made up in two 8-ounce glasses of milk. Like 8 ounces of milk has 8 grams of protein. So if your little one drinks 16 ounces of milk in a day, they met their protein needs for the day. That doesn't mean they don't need to eat anything else. I'm not saying only let your kid drink milk, but just meaning it is actually easier to meet their needs than you think. And so, especially when I hear parents all the time, like, please eat 2 more bites of your chicken, or you need to eat protein before you can have more pasta, or things like that. Those couple of bites, first of all, are not going to make a huge difference in your little one's nutritional intake. But what pressuring them to do that and asking them to do that may do is push them further away from eventually liking or accepting that food. So, in terms of peace of mind around protein, it's really easy to meet those needs, even with allergies. So, kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's just being strategic and finding different means. Definitely, that's I'm kind of mind blown by that value. I just looking back now, it makes sense. I mean, their stomachs are so tiny. They're these little humans, and I can't imagine him eating like an entire chicken breast. And when you think of it that way, it's kind of like, why did I think he needed that much? But
Well,
that's
and so
good.
going
That's
back
good.
to even macronutrient distribution, that a toddler's diet should be made up of 50 to 60% carbohydrate. That doesn't mean they need to be processed or refined carbohydrates, but that could be things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, dairy, all those things, starchy vegetables. All those things provide carbohydrate. So when we really put that into perspective, it makes a little bit more sense. Those protein needs are also minimum. So most toddlers do exceed that regularly, and that's okay. But knowing that, especially on a day that appetite's different or we're sick, that's a really big one. Getting a sick toddler to eat anything feels impossible. And it can be a time that's so anxiety ridden for parents because they're like, I just need them to get to eat something. But they're their needs really are not as high as you think a lot of times.
Yeah, I'm glad we touched on that because that kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. And I think protein is just really a hype nutrient in general right now. I mean, obviously it's important. We want it to be a part of our diet, but if there's a nutrient that I would put more emphasis on for little ones, it would be fat, because fat is the powerhouse of brain development and they need fat in their diet. So honestly, I would focus more on that than on the protein shakes that Costco wants you to buy.
And what are some of those good sources of fat?
Yeah, so avocados, nuts and seeds, nut butters, olive oil, avocado oil, cheese, any form of full fat dairy. Really, for little ones under the age of 2, fat shouldn't be limited, and they don't need reduced fat or non-fat products either. So under the age of 2, all foods should be full fat.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And kind of going back to the allergies,
Yes, sorry, I got excited.
I'm glad we got sidetracked. I think that was really good information. I had two or three people ask this, so I want to make sure we touch on it. As far as introducing some allergenic foods, if you have a worry that they may have peanut allergies or things like that, is there a safe way to do that? I mean, I've seen some where people will like go sit outside a fire department and do eggs or peanuts and stuff like that. What are your kind of takes on introducing, like shellfish in some of those?
Yeah. So know the risk associated with your child. If there's a reason for there to be a higher likelihood of your child having an allergy, then you definitely want to be prepared. So, like, if there is an allergy that runs in the family that, well, hey, there's a chance or a higher chance that they are going to have an allergy to this, then I'm not one to knock on you. If you want to go sit in the ER parking lot because that's going to make you feel better about it, do it. As a mom,
No
do what
harm.
makes you feel comfortable. I mean, I could tell you all the things that you could do to help you feel more safe doing it at home, but at the end of the day, if that doesn't make you feel safe, that's your baby. Do what makes you feel safe. So I don't think you're crazy if you want to go sit in the parking lot. Personally, I didn't do that, but I also understand that fear. In regards to introductions and exposures, research does support early introduction of all the top allergens. So even if your little one or you think that your little one has a higher risk of developing allergies, I wouldn't wait longer to introduce them. Earlier you introduce, and the more often that you introduce, the likelihood of them developing that allergy decreases. So, as early as 6 months, you can start introducing all top 9 allergens. And it's really not a one and done, like in terms of, oh, we introduced shellfish, check, now we're done. They're not allergic to it. Once you've done that initial exposure, you want to continue offering those foods because it's the early and often introduction or exposure that's going to help prevent that allergy from developing.
Gotcha. When you take the step and say, "Hey, we're gonna, do these introductions," time frame from saying, "Hey, let's try peanuts," and then wait X amount of days and try something else. Is there a time frame for that?
Yeah, so for the top allergens, those are really the only foods that you have to go one at a time with. So when you're starting solids with a baby, you don't have to go one food at a time unless it's the top allergens. You do want to wait a couple days in between, but also allow for an additional exposure after the initial one. And what I mean by that is sometimes a baby could have a reaction to an allergen on the second exposure when they didn't have it on the first. So I would put focus on, like, let's say we're doing peanuts, do peanuts one day, do peanuts again another day, and then give it a couple days before introducing another one.
Okay.
The other thing that parents can do, and then that is smart to do when you're introducing allergens, is to introduce them earlier in the day so that you have more time to monitor for any kind of reaction, as opposed to like doing it at dinner time and then an hour later they're going to bed. Um, Introducing that allergen maybe at breakfast so that you have the day to watch and monitor.
Very good point. And maybe like on a Saturday morning where they're going to be home for the weekend if they do go to daycare or school. And you mentioned the top allergens. Is there like a top five list or something?
There's 9 top allergens.
Okay.
So dairy, eggs, wheat, soy, sesame, tree nut, peanut, shellfish, and fish
Props
are
to
the
you.
top
I did
nine
not mean to
allergens.
put you on the spot like that. I thought it was going to be like four or five.
No, you're good. That's why I brought my hands out because I was like, I need to make sure I get on that.
That was just a verification that you really are a dietitian. So
Thank you. Did I pass the test?
she's clear, everybody. You can keep listening. Awesome. And I guess kind of tied into that one, choking hazards.
Hmm,
I know that's something big that is a huge fear for everybody. Are there any foods that for kids 2 and under that should just be an absolute no go?
for sure. Popcorn, whole nuts.
So you mean like a whole almond, a whole cashew, any whole nut in general? Okay. All right.
Peanut. For any nuts at that age, you want them to be either a nut butter or crushed. After 2, you can do halved nuts, so like nuts cut in half. But yeah, whole nuts are definitely a choking hazard under 2. whole grapes, anything that's like a round shape. So grapes, cherry tomatoes, you want those things to be quartered or quartered as a baby up to 18 months. And then after 18 months, you can go to halved, but they at least need to be cut. Those are kind of like anything that is hard, round hot dogs or sausages that aren't cut are also a choking hazard. So you want those to be cut lengthwise before serving. Those are all big choking hazards for sure. I
Okay.
think popcorn is one that I see toddlers eating popcorn a lot, like as snacks, and it terrifies me. But popcorn is a choking hazard until 4.
Wow. I knew it was definitely in the 2 year range, but till 4. Interesting. Very cool. All right. Though none of those really surprised me. So I feel like I
Okay.
I feel like I was kind of well versed in that one. I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of our incredible conversation with Kathy O'Brien, also known as the Mini Me Dietitian. We've already covered so much valuable ground, everything from creating balanced meals for your little ones to understanding food allergies and managing the all-important protein needs. If you've been nodding along, picking up tips, or even had a few of those aha moments, just wait, it gets even better. In part 2, we're diving headfirst into some of the hottest topics every parents face. Those are managing picky eaters, the sugar dilemma, and covering practical, no-nonsense tips for those busy parents and trying to make sure that you're taking care of your little one. And let me tell you, her advice on building a healthy relationship with food, not just for your kids, but for yourself, is something you don't want to miss. So if you haven't already, hit the follow button and make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform. Part 2 drops soon. Keep an eye out and stay rebellious and keep owning your health. We'll see you next time.